Hey everyone, I am Rosehart. Before we dive into today's story, it would mean the world if you could hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It really helps the channel grow and keeps these stories coming. Philadelphia's grimy brick faded to a smear as the train accelerated, each revolution of the wheels a definitive break from the past. Clara Bellamy's fingers, bone white, tightened around the handle of her time-worn satchel. Within resided her meagre estate, a spare wardrobe, a dog-eared Pride and Prejudice, her mother's silver keepsake, and the creased parchment that promised a new beginning. She chanced a backward glance at the retreating cityscape. No waving figures, no fond adieus. Only the stoic buildings, grim sentinels against a somber sky. A solitary departure, yes, but also an liberation. Every clack of the tracks carried her away from the oppressive gloom of her father's domicile, from the cutting remarks and the perpetual anxiety that had dogged her steps. She shut her eyes, picturing her mother's tranquil visage, even in death. The locket, a warm pressure against her chest, served as a tactile echo of affection cruelly curtailed. It was for her memory, as much as for her own sake, that Clara embarked on this bold venture to discover a place where compassion and dignity were inherent, not privileges. Again, she unfolded the letter, her trembling finger tracing the elegant penmanship. "Esteemed Miss Bellamy," it commenced, "I am a widower, 42 years of age, residing in Bitter Creek, Wyoming Territory. A rancher. I own a modest spread just outside town. I seek a wife, a partner to share my life and cultivate a future." The prose lacked embellishment, devoid of romantic flourishes. Perhaps genuine, though. Jacob Holt described himself as unadorned, a man wedded to the soil. He offered no grand pronouncements or whirlwind wooing, only a forthright proposal of companionship and shared industry. In desperation, she had answered his advertisement, latching onto the prospect that even a pragmatic union might afford more comfort than the misery she was fleeing. The train's steady thrum soothed her into a restless slumber. Fleeting phantoms danced behind her closed eyelids. Her father's contorted expression, the telltale gleam of spirits in his gaze, the comforting presence of Mrs. Henderson, the kind neighbour who introduced her to the world of books, the sweeping, untamed plains she imagined, beyond Bitter Creek. A piercing whistle jolted her awake. The panorama had morphed. Gone were Pennsylvania's gentle slopes, replaced by boundless expanses of golden wheat, rippling in the breeze. The air felt rarefied, invigorating, carrying the scent of parched earth and far-off blossoms. Across the aisle, a young woman, her cheeks flushed, and her hair a fiery auburn cascade, offered a smile. "Going far?" she inquired, her tone radiant. Clara paused, then reciprocated with a small, hesitant smile. "Wyoming Territory," she replied. The woman's eyes widened in surprise. "Goodness, that's quite a jaunt. Visiting family, are you?" "Something akin to that," Clara demurred, reluctant to share her circumstances with a stranger. "Well, have a safe journey," the woman offered, returning to her needlepoint. Clara leaned against the window, watching the terrain race by. Wyoming. A territory known only from maps and pulp novels. A domain of cowboys and desperados, of limitless spaces and untamed wilderness. What awaited her there? She pictured Jacob Holt. His letter offered scant physical details, only his age and profession. In her mind's eye, she conjured a hardy yet appealing man, perhaps with affable eyes and a kind smile. Strong and protective, a bulwark against life's harshness. But what if he wasn't? What if he proved to be coarse and unkind, as solitary and wounded as she? Had she merely exchanged one prison for another? The thought sent a tremor of trepidation down her spine. She was stepping into uncharted territory, entrusting her destiny to a complete unknown. A terrifying gamble, yet one she felt compelled to take. Anything had to be better than the life she had escaped. Days dissolved into nights, the train's cadence a constant drone. Clara passed the time reading, sketching in her journal, and struggling to suppress the mounting anxiety that threatened to consume her. She observed her fellow travelers, each with their own narratives and destinations. The gruff cattleman with his weathered Stetson and gnarled hands, the young mother clutching her infant, her face a map of anxieties, the travelling merchant, with his slicked hair and endless stream of anecdotes. She felt like an outsider, a spectre flitting through their lives. She didn't belong, not yet. She was still Clara Bellamy of Philadelphia, a young woman haunted by the spectres of her past. But she hoped, with unwavering resolve, that one day she would become Clara Holt of Bitter Creek, a woman who had found solace and belonging in this rugged, uncompromising terrain. As the train approached its final stop, the landscape grew increasingly desolate. Verdant fields yielded to stony hills and sparse brushwood. The air was arid and thin, the sun beating down with merciless force. This was the West, stark and unforgiving. Bitter Creek. Even the name sounded desolate, bleak. She gathered her possessions, smoothing the creases from her simple cotton dress. She had chosen it with care, hoping to create a favourable impression. A pale blue, the colour of a summer sky, a striking contrast to the muted browns and greys that dominated her wardrobe. With a screech, the train shuddered to a halt, its metal protesting against the silence. Clara descended onto the platform, her heart hammering in her chest. Bitter Creek consisted of a handful of wooden structures clustered around a dusty thoroughfare, a saloon, a general store, a farrier's shop. A few horses were tethered to posts, their tails flicking listlessly in the heat. She searched the faces of the locals, seeking a sign, an identifier. Which one was Jacob Holt? And then she noticed him. He stood near the edge of the platform, a towering figure clad in a worn leather jerkin and faded denim. He bore little resemblance to her imagined ideal. Not the handsome stranger of her fantasies, but something altogether different. His face was etched with lines, carved by the harsh realities of existence. Grey threaded his hair, bound back from his brow with a strip of leather. But it was his eyes that captivated her, a stormy grey, harbouring a profound, unspoken sorrow. He appeared older than his stated age, aged by time itself. He wasn't smiling. He defied her expectations. Disappointment, sharp and stinging, pierced through her. She wanted to retreat, to board the train and flee as far as possible. This wasn't the refuge she had envisioned, merely another desolate outpost filled with shadows. Yet, as his gaze met hers, a flicker ignited within their depths. A spark of what? Recognition? Curiosity. He pushed away from the post and began to walk toward her, his gait unhurried and deliberate. Clara stood paralyzed, her satchel clutched tightly. She steeled herself for the disappointment, for the devastating realization that she had committed a grave error. He stopped before her, his presence overwhelming in the confined space. Though he didn't smile, a subtle softening eased the lines around his eyes. He removed his hat, revealing more of the silver in his hair. "Miss Bellamy?" he inquired, his voice a deep rumble. Clara swallowed, her throat parched. "Mr. Holt?" she managed, barely audible. He nodded. "Welcome to Bitter Creek." He reached for her satchel, his calloused hand brushing against hers. An unexpected, electric current surged through her. He offered no further greeting, simply turned toward a dusty buckboard parked nearby. Clara hesitated, then followed, her heart pounding. As she walked, she couldn't dispel the sensation that she had just entered a narrative far more intricate and unpredictable than anything she could have conceived. The train groaned, a drawn-out lament of steam and protesting metal as it halted abruptly. Clara's forehead met the cold pane of the window Bitter Creek. The name itself tasted of grit and shattered expectations. Gone was Pennsylvania's vibrant tapestry here unfolded a parched panorama of ochre and rust, punctuated by skeletal shrubs and desiccated trees. Above, the azure sky, bleached bone-white by the sun's relentless glare, stretched endlessly. Stepping off the train was like entering a kiln. The air, thick and arid, drank the moisture from her instantly. She gripped her carpet bag, its worn fabric, a familiar reassurance in this alien place. The platform, crudely fashioned from splintered planks slicked with oil, offered little welcome. A cluster of men, their faces map-like with the etchings of frontier hardship, leaned against the depot, their gazes lingering on her with unsettling intensity. Straightening, Clara forced a smile. This was it. Rebirth. She searched the small gathering, seeking a semblance of the man from Jacob Holt's correspondence. A more youthful face. A warmer one. The town offered no solace. A lone, dust-choked street extended into the hazy distance, flanked by buildings seemingly constructed from salvaged scraps and wishful thinking. The saloon, with its clamorous sounds and swinging doors, pulsed with the only apparent vitality. A perpetual haze, stirred by wandering curs and passing carts, hung in the air. Despair threatened to drown her. This wasn't the promised century, but an agonizing remove from Philadelphia's lively streets, from the stifling embrace of her former, privileged life. Then she spotted him. Set apart, a stark silhouette against the sun's harsh light, he towered above the others. Broader than anticipated, his shoulders squared as though bearing an unseen weight. A weathered vest cloaked a faded blue shirt, his trousers tucked into well-worn boots. The brim of his hat shadowed his features. This was not the man she'd envisioned. The letters had alluded to a man touched by hardship, perhaps, but not this bedrock presence. He looked hewn from the very earth, as unforgiving as the landscape itself. As he moved, the sunlight kissed his face, revealing a roadmap of deep lines around his eyes and mouth, silent stories of years weathered and loves lost. Silver threaded through the hair visible beneath his hat. He appeared significantly older than his letters had indicated. A wash of disappointment flooded her. Was this the man on whom she had staked her future? He seemed less a new beginning, and more the tail end of a long story. He stopped before her, his eyes, the colour of a tempestuous sea, assessing her with a quiet intensity. A profound weariness resided within their depths, a sadness that mirrored her own. Clara Bellamy? His voice, a coarse rumble, possessed a subtle undercurrent. Regret? Acceptance? She managed a hesitant nod, her voice trapped. Yes, Mr. Holt. Removing his hat, he revealed a face both rugged and surprisingly gentle. The lines around his eyes deepened as a faint, hesitant smile touched his lips, a fleeting expression that caught her unaware. Jacob, he amended, his gaze unwavering. Welcome to Bitter Creek, Miss Bellamy Clara. He extended a hand, calloused yet offering a surprisingly tender grip. A jolt, unexpected, surged through her. She met his gaze, and for a heartbeat, the dust and disappointment receded, replaced by a fragile ember of something nascent. Thank you, she breathed, her voice barely audible. He lifted her carpet bag with unexpected ease. The wagon's waiting, It's a fair piece to the ranch. As they walked, Clara stole glances. He was no storybook hero, yet possessed a certain magnetism. A quiet dignity drew her in, despite her initial reaction. The wagon, ancient and creaking, protested with every turn of its wooden wheels. The journey was jarring, a dust devil swirling around them. Silence settled between them, granting Clara ample opportunity for observation. His hands, resting on the reins, were large and knobby, etched with scars. His gaze was fixed on the distant horizon, his expression unreadable. She wondered at his thoughts. What did he see when he looked at her? A solution to his solitude? Or simply another cross to bear? The monotonous landscape blurred, a repetitive tableau of brown and grey. The sun blazed relentlessly, the dust a constant irritant. A growing unease settled over Clara, a prickling at the nape of her neck. She was a stranger in a strange land, tethered to a man unknown. As the sun dipped, painting the sky in fiery hues of apricot and rose, they arrived at the ranch, a cluster of time-worn structures huddled against the vast prairie. A simple, unadorned house, a weathered barn, and a few outbuildings. It exuded loneliness, a tiny island of habitation in a sea of wilderness. Clara descended, her muscles aching. Surveying the scene, the ranch, then Jacob, her heart swelled with a mix of apprehension and something indefinable. This was it. Her new existence. Unchosen, yet one she was determined to navigate. Even if it meant wedding a stranger in the middle of nowhere. Even if it meant confronting the desolation and disillusionment that seemed woven into the fabric of this new world. He turned, his eyes seeking hers. "Welcome home, Clara." The buckboard lurched away from Bitter Creek, the small collection of buildings receding into the distance like scattered pebbles. Clara adjusted on the seat, the horse's hooves beating a steady rhythm against the backdrop with profound quiet. Beside her, Jacob guided the reins, his gaze unwavering on the distant horizon. He'd offered scant conversation since their departure, and sensing his introspective mood, Clara refrained from prompting him. The landscape unfurled in hues of umber and sand, an apparently boundless stretch of scrubland and rock formations. The air held a parched quality, scented with the tang of sage and sun-baked earth. Now and then, a hawk wheeled above, its keen cry slicing through the stillness. Clara had only glimpsed such vistas in illustrations, but experiencing it directly stirred something within her. It was both magnificent and daunting, a place where existence felt like a perpetual negotiation. What seemed an eternity later, a faint emerald streak appeared on the horizon, heralding the proximity of water and respite. As they approached, Clara distinguished a scattering of cottonwoods fringing the banks of a creek. "Holt Ranch," Jacob stated, with a subtle inclination of his head. The ranch house was a plain affair, constructed from roughly hewn timber and weathered planks. It stood resolute against the elements, prioritizing utility over aesthetic appeal. A generous veranda spanned the facade, promising shaded sanctuary from the relentless sun. A barn stood a distance away, along with a corral and a small outbuilding Clara surmised was a smokehouse. No other habitation was visible. As they drew to a halt before the house, Clara absorbed the details. The porch swing was still, its chains emitting a soft creak in the breeze. A few hardy wildflowers struggled for survival near the steps. Everything hinted at secluded living, a life lived intimately with the land's rhythms. Jacob assisted her down, his touch fleeting but firm. "Welcome home, Clara," he greeted, his voice a low timbre. Clara offered a shy smile. "Thank you, Jacob. It's quite a change from Philadelphia." He nodded, a hint of something indecipherable in his eyes. "Change for the better, I hope. Time will tell," she replied, eliciting a brief chuckle from him. He escorted her up the steps and onto the veranda. The front door, solid and unadorned, secured with a simple iron latch, beckoned. He pushed it inward, and Clara crossed the threshold. Inside, the house was dusky, the windows small and shuttered against the searing heat. The air, cool and still, carried the subtle aroma of wood smoke and dust motes dancing in the faint light. The main room served as both a living area and a kitchen. A grand stone fireplace dominated one wall, its hearth meticulously swept. A roughly fashioned table and chairs occupied the centre of the room, and an array of pots and pans hung above the cook-stove. Clara trailed a gloved finger along the mantelpiece, the wood polished smooth by time. The room felt vacant, not merely sparsely furnished, but lacking in warmth. The atmosphere felt thick with unvoiced narratives, the echoes of lives lived and perhaps lost. Jacob watched her, his expression guarded and assessing. "It ain't much," he said, "but it's a roof." "It's solid," Clara replied, striving for a positive tone, "and tidy." He gave a clipped nod. "I keep it that way." He indicated a narrow corridor extending from the main room. "Your room's down there." Clara followed him, her boots quiet on the wooden floorboards. The hallway was dim, illuminated only by a sliver of sunshine penetrating a crack in the wall. The temperature seemed colder here, as if the sun's touch couldn't reach into the depths of the shadows. Jacob halted before a door, pushing it open. The room was diminutive, containing only a bed, a washstand, and a plain wooden chair. A single window faced the rear of the house. The walls were bare, the only embellishment a simple quilt draped across the bed. Spartan, yes, but clean and offering privacy. A sudden wave of emotion washed over Clara as she understood this was the first space she could truly claim as her own in a long while. "It's charming," she said, facing Jacob. He appeared unconvinced. "It's just a room." "I can haul your trunk in here." "That would be wonderful, thank you." Jacob departed, and Clara heard his movements outside. She approached the window and gazed out. She saw the corral, a small kitchen garden, and beyond it, the seemingly endless expanse of the prairie. She pondered what life would entail in this place, so removed from everything familiar. Could she acclimate to this stark, unyielding land? Could she discover contentment with this reticent, reserved man? She turned back, her eyes encompassing the unadorned walls and simple furnishings. It wasn't the opulent existence she had envisioned, but it marked a beginning. A chance for renewal, to leave behind the gloom of her past. Jacob returned, bearing her trunk with surprising effortlessness. He placed it at the foot of the bed. "Need anything else?" Clara hesitated, searching for the appropriate words. "Just some time to settle." He nodded his understanding. "I'll leave you to it then. Supper will be ready in a few hours." He turned to go, but Clara forestalled him. "Jacob?" He paused, his eyes questioning. "Thank you," she said, "for bringing me here." A subtle curve graced his lips. "You're welcome, Clara." He left the room, quietly closing the door. Clara remained alone in the hush, the burden of her history weighing heavily. She walked to her trunk and lifted the lid, her fingers caressing the familiar items inside. A few garments, a well-worn Bible, a small portrait of her mother. These were the remnants of her former life, the fragments she had brought with her into this novel chapter. She inhaled deeply, attempting to steady her composure. It was time to unpack, to find her footing, to commence building a future on this isolated ranch. It was time to confront the uncertainties ahead, with Jacob Holt at her side. As she commenced unpacking, she noticed a petite, desiccated blossom nestled within the pages of her Bible. It was a forget-me-not, a poignant reminder of remembrance. She cradled it in her palm, a bittersweet token of what she had relinquished, and a hopeful harbinger of what the future might hold. The coppery tang of overcharged sugar permeated the cramped kitchen, a testament to Clara's failed baking attempt. She coughed, swatting at the greasy smoke coiling from the cast-iron pan with a dish towel. Apple pie, a sliver of her former life, lay in blackened ruins, a burnt offering to the stark realities of the West. Jacob's arrival was silent. His rugged countenance gave nothing away as he took in the scene. Instead of comment, he simply swung open the back door, inviting in a gust of cool air laced with sage. "Grabs on," he rumbled, placing a plate laden with beans and salt pork alongside a hardened loaf. Shame prickled Clara's skin. I tried for a pie." A fleeting glance at the incinerated dessert was his only acknowledgement. "Some folks are just born knowing how," he stated, devoid of any accusation. He ate with a quiet efficiency. Clara, her appetite vanished, pushed the beans around her plate. A wave of longing washed over her, not specifically for the Philadelphia mansion, but for the cozy, yeasty comfort of her mother's kitchen. Here, every task felt alien, every ingredient resistant. The following morning broke cold and brilliant. Jacob, after a wordless breakfast, jerked his chin toward the barn. "Meet Bess." Bess, a Guernsey of considerable girth and gentle demeanour, watched Clara with liquid, intelligent eyes. Trepidation fluttered in Clara's stomach. She'd seen cattle, of course, specks against distant hills from a train carriage. But the act of milking remained an abstract concept. Jacob's hands, surprisingly deft, guided her through the process of compression and release. "Like that," he instructed, his tone even. "Takes patience." Clara mimicked him, her initial efforts rewarded only with Bess's lowing protests and a meagre spatter of milk. Jacob remained a steadfast presence at her shoulder. Finally, after a series of blundering tries, a warm jet streamed into the pail, frothing at the surface. "There you go," Jacob remarked, a subtle upturn at the corner of his mouth. "You'll get the knack." Her arms throbbed, her fingers ached, yet a burgeoning sense of accomplishment unfurled within her. It wasn't elegant, nor polished, but it was tangible, real. Back in the farmhouse, Clara faced the accumulated layers of dust and neglect. A sense of abandonment clung to the place the furniture worn, the windows opaque with grime. She scoured and buffed, each motion infused with growing confidence. As she laboured, she noticed subtle details. A sepia-toned photograph tucked into a drawer. A child's crayon drawing concealed beneath a warped floorboard. These fragments offered glimpses into Jacob's vanished world, the family who once inhabited these rooms. Compassion welled up within her. This wasn't just a dwelling, it was a container of memories, some joyful, some deeply scarred. That evening, Clara presented Jacob with a rudimentary yet edible stew. It wasn't her mother's celebrated bouillabaisse, but it was nourishing and warm. They ate in a comfortable silence, punctuated only by the fire's crepitation. Afterward, Jacob sat by the hearth, carving a piece of wood. Clara, heartened by the stew's success, picked up a volume of Dickinson's verse she'd carried west. She read aloud, her delivery tentative at first, then gaining surety as she became immersed in the meter. Jacob offered no audible reaction, but she noticed he didn't cease his carving. He simply listened. Days later, a northerly storm swept in, cocooning the ranch in a swathe of white. Cabin fever began to gnaw at Clara. She yearned for her books, her piano, the vibrant intellectual currents of her former existence. Sensing her restlessness, Jacob retrieved a box of antique toys from the attic. Simple wooden creations, lovingly crafted. A rocking horse, a miniature train, a set of building blocks. "My boys," he stated, his voice roughened by suppressed emotion. He rarely mentioned his son. Clara cradled the rocking horse, its faded paint flaking off. She traced the contours of the worn wood. "He must have treasured these," she murmured. Jacob nodded once. He did. They whiled away the afternoon constructing a precarious tower of blocks, their initial stiffness dissipating in the shared endeavour. Clara found herself laughing, a spontaneous, unrestrained sound that surprised even herself. Jacob watched her, a glint of humour in his gaze. As the days bled into weeks, Clara steadily adapted to the rhythms of frontier life. She learned to handle a horse, to repair fences, to distinguish the calls of the various birds that nested in the cottonwoods along the creek bank. She unearthed an inner strength she hadn't known existed. One evening, as twilight brushed the sky with streaks of crimson and gold, Jacob spoke, his tone subdued and hesitant. "You didn't have to stay, Clara." She met his gaze, her pulse quickening. "I know," she responded. "Why did you?" She paused, searching for the precise words. "I wanted to," she finally said. "I wanted to see if we could build a life here. Together." He scrutinized her, his intense eyes probing hers. She detected a spark within them, something akin to hope. He reached for her hand, his calloused palm covering hers. His touch was rough, yet unexpectedly tender. "It won't be simple," he warned. "I'm not afraid of hard work, Jacob," Clara countered, her voice unwavering. The storm clouds gathered anew, mirroring the anxieties within her. Her history remained a spectre, threatening to engulf her in shadows. But here, in this harsh, unforgiving land, she had glimpsed a fragile light, an opportunity for a fresh start, and she resolved to fight for it. Later that night, a sound jolted Clara awake. Perhaps a horse, or simply the wind playing tricks on the eaves. But a sense of unease lingered. She slipped out of bed, draping her shawl around her. Peering through the window pane, she discerned a figure detaching itself from the darkness, his face obscured. A figure that sent a wave of chilling dread through her figure she had believed she'd escaped forever. Her past had arrived. The silence in the cabin was a heavy blanket, smothering the small sounds of daily life. Jacob had left before dawn to check the north fence line, a grim set to his jaw that mirrored the stormy sky threatening rain. Clara, restless and unable to settle into any chore, found herself drawn to the small, scarred chest tucked beneath the window in their bedroom. It wasn't locked. Hesitantly, she lifted the lid. The scent of aged wood and lavender filled the air, a surprising fragrance in such a stark place. Inside, nestled amongst faded linens, lay a collection of mementos. A tarnished silver locket, a dried sprig of wildflowers, and a small leather-bound book with gilt lettering too worn to read. Beneath these treasures rested a photograph. Clara gently lifted it, her breath catching in her throat. It was a portrait of a woman, her dark hair pulled back from a face both beautiful and serene. A young boy, perhaps 5 or 6 years old, stood beside her, his hand resting trustingly on her skirt. His smile was wide and infectious, mirroring the light in his mother's eyes. They were Jacob's wife and son. A pang of guilt twisted in Clara's chest. She'd been so focused on her own troubles, so blind to the depth of Jacob's pain. She carefully returned the photograph to its place, the image of the smiling boy seared into her memory. She closed the chest, the click of the latch echoing in the quiet room. Later that day, Clara walked into Bitter Creek, seeking supplies for the week ahead. The general store was bustling with activity. Ranchers stocking up on ammunition, children chasing stray dogs, and women exchanging gossip over bolts of fabric. Ruth Miller, her face a road map of wrinkles etched by sun and laughter, waved Clara over to the counter. "Clara, dear, how are you settling in? Jacob keeping you busy?" Ruth asked, her eyes twinkling with curiosity. Clara managed a weak smile. "Yes, ma'am. There's always something to be done." Ruth leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "He's a good man, Jacob. A quiet one, but good. Went through more than any man should." Clara hesitated, then, emboldened by the photograph she'd seen, she asked, "His wife? And son?" Ruth's smile faded, replaced by a shadow of sadness. "Sarah was an angel, pure and simple, and little Thomas, a ray of sunshine. Jacob worshipped them both." She sighed, her gaze drifting towards the window. "It was the fever, you see. Swept through the territory like a wildfire. Took Sarah first, then Thomas, just a week later. Jacob never recovered, not truly. He never talks about them," Clara said softly, more to herself than to Ruth. "Talking doesn't come easy to him. He buried his grief deep, built a wall around his heart. Some folk thought he'd never come back to life. Then you arrived." Ruth reached out and squeezed Clara's hand. "You've brought a spark back to his eyes, child. Don't let it go out." Clara swallowed hard, the weight of Ruth's words settling heavily on her shoulders. She paid for her supplies and stepped back out into the dusty street, the image of Jacob's lost family haunting her. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Clara watched Jacob from the cabin window. He was standing by the corral, leaning against the fence, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. There was a profound loneliness in his posture, a weariness that went beyond the physical demands of ranch work. He seemed utterly alone, a solitary figure, silhouetted against the vastness of the Wyoming landscape. Clara knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, but the man she had married was still grieving, still haunted by the ghosts of his past. Later, after supper, as Jacob sat by the fire, whittling a piece of wood, Clara gathered her courage. "Jacob," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. I saw the photograph." His hand stilled, the knife hovering over the wood. He didn't look up. "Photograph?" "In the chest. Of Sarah and Thomas." A long silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackling of the fire. Finally, he spoke, his voice rough with emotion. "They were my world." Clara moved closer, kneeling beside him. "Ruth told me about the fever." He nodded, his gaze fixed on the flames. "It took them so quickly. One day they were here, laughing, full of life. The next—" He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Clara reached out and gently placed her hand over his. His skin was rough and calloused, but beneath the roughness, she felt a tremor of vulnerability. "I'm sorry, Jacob," she whispered. "I can't imagine the pain you've endured." He finally looked at her, his eyes filled with a pain that mirrored the storm brewing outside. "It never goes away, Clara. The emptiness, it's always there." "Maybe," she said softly. "Maybe it doesn't have to be so empty." She squeezed his hand, offering a silent promise of companionship, of shared burdens, of a future built on something more than just necessity. He didn't say anything, but his gaze softened, a flicker of hope igniting in the depths of his eyes. The rain began to fall, drumming against the roof of the cabin, a somber melody that echoed the whispers of the past, but also a promise of a new beginning. Clara stayed by his side, offering the quiet comfort of her presence, a silent vow to help him carry the weight of his grief, and perhaps, together, find a way to heal. The Wyoming morning arrived, crisp and luminous, the sun gilding the plains in tones of apricot and gold. Clara, anticipating the day, rose to the aroma of brewing coffee. Jacob was already outside, attending to the horses, the sight of his strong form beneath the fabric of his worn work shirt, and the tender way he stroked the velvety muzzle of a chestnut mare, pulled her to the window. An intangible lightness seemed to cloak him, a stark contrast to the previous night's heavy atmosphere. She turned to the familiar task of preparing breakfast biscuits smothered in creamy gravy, a skill honed during her time in the orphanage kitchen. As Jacob entered, a brief, almost bashful glance met her gaze. They ate in companionable silence, a welcome change from the earlier days of awkwardness. "That south pasture fence is down," Clara mentioned, after finishing their meal. "Some of the cows were straying yesterday." Surprise flickered across Jacob's face. "I had it on my list for today. Don't fret about it." Clara pressed, "I want to lend a hand. A little hard work won't scare me." He regarded her for a beat, then conceded, "All right. But the real grunt work is mine." The sun climbed higher, bathing the land in warmth as they walked toward the damaged fence. Jacob patiently demonstrated wire splicing and post-hammering techniques. Her unaccustomed hands soon prickled with blisters, yet she remained silent, finding a deep satisfaction in the rhythmic swing of the hammer and the coarse feel of the treated wood. Jacob worked beside her, each movement honed by years of experience. Unnecessary chatter wasn't his style, but he answered her questions with consideration, explaining wood types and efficient wiring methods. She noticed the deep furrows etched around his keen eyes, the landscape of calluses on his palms, each a testament to a life lived in the embrace of the outdoors, of toil and endurance. As they worked, conversation flowed, focused not on the past, but on the tangible present. The ranch, shifting weather patterns, their animals. Clara discovered Jacob's lifelong ambition to be a rancher and his diligent savings to acquire the land. He spoke of the trials inherent to ranching life, the caprices of our sears, nature, the constant hustle for survival. In turn, Clara recounted life at the orphanage, the austere rules and meager meals, the friendships forged with other children, her makeshift family. She confided her dreams. A place to call home, a family of her own, a true sense of belonging. By late afternoon, the fence stood repaired, safely containing the herd. Standing back, they surveyed their accomplishment, sweat mingling with dust on their skin. The shared labor had birthed a potent sense of purpose. "Thanks, Clara." Jacob's voice was raspy but sincere. "Couldn't have managed without you." Clara smiled. "I enjoyed it. It felt good to contribute." That evening, after supper, Clara unearthed a volume of Emily Dickinson's poetry from her trunk. She'd always found comfort in verse, in the way words could distill the complex essence of human emotion. "Would you mind if I read aloud?" she asked Jacob, who was settling into his usual fireside chair. He looked up, startled. "Read aloud? What's the occasion?" "Just to pass the time," Clara explained. "Unless you'd rather I didn't." Jacob shrugged. "Doesn't bother me. I'm no reader myself, but I suppose I can listen." She positioned herself opposite him, opened the book, and began. Her voice, gentle and resonant, filled the room, breathing life into the stanzas. "Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all." Jacob listened, his gaze fixed on the dancing flames. While the nuances of the words sometimes escaped him, A feeling stirred within, a sense of quiet solace. He closed his eyes, letting the cadence of her voice envelop him, a soothing balm to his weary spirit. Clara continued, her inflection painting vivid imagery with each line. She explored themes of love and loss, elation and despair, and the breathtaking enigma of existence. When she ceased, a prolonged silence descended. Jacob opened his eyes, meeting her gaze. A novel understanding shone within them, a glimmer of something indefinable. "That was nice," he murmured. "Thank you, Clara." She offered a radiant smile, one that embraced her entire face. "You're welcome, Jacob." As days morphed into weeks, Clara and Jacob's bond deepened, cultivated through shared meals, tandem work, and evening recitations. They learned to anticipate each other's needs, respect the unspoken word, and value each other's individual strengths. Clara found herself increasingly drawn to Jacob's understated fortitude, his unyielding honesty, and his inherent benevolence. She saw beyond the rough exterior to the wounded heart within, a heart craving connection, healing, and affection. Jacob, in turn, became enthralled by Clara's sharp intellect, her indomitable spirit, and her unwavering optimism. He recognized in her a spark that had been absent from his life for an eternity, a beacon illuminating hope, redemption, and a future he hadn't permitted himself to envision. He eagerly anticipated her presence, her smile, her tender touch. One evening, as they sat bathed in firelight, Jacob reached for Clara's hand. His hand, etched with the marks of hard labor, trembled slightly as he took hers. Clara met his gaze, her heart quickening. "Clara," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "I am starting to have feelings for you." Tears welled in Clara's eyes. "I'm starting to feel the same, Jacob," she breathed. He tightened his grip, his gaze intense. "I know this is all happening swiftly, and I know you came seeking a husband, but what?" Clara asked, her voice barely a whisper. "But I want you to understand that I'm not merely seeking a wife," Jacob said. "I'm searching for a partner, a friend, someone to share my whole life. And I believe you could be that person, Clara." Tears streamed down Clara's cheeks. She leaned in and kissed him, a hesitant, tender kiss that spoke volumes without any words. Jacob met her kiss, his arms encircling her, drawing her closer. The kiss deepened, gaining a fervent passion, a testament to the emotions that had swelled between them. A pledge for a shared journey ahead. The sun beat down mercilessly as Clara hung laundry on the line, the scent of lye soap heavy in the air. She hummed a tuneless melody, enjoying the simple rhythm of the task. Jacob was out checking on the north pasture, and the solitude felt peaceful, a far cry from the stifling tension that had perpetually clung to the air back home. Suddenly, the rhythmic creak of wagon wheels broke the silence. A sturdy buckboard pulled into the yard, drawn by a pair of handsome bays. A man hopped down with a practiced ease that spoke of countless hours spent in the saddle. He was taller than Jacob, broader, with a neatly trimmed moustache, and eyes that seemed to assess the entire ranch with a single glance. "Afternoon," he called out, his voice carrying easily across the yard. "Name's Jebediah Stone. Neighbor from the west. Figured I'd introduce myself." Clara straightened, wiping her hands on her apron. "Clara Holt," she replied, offering a polite smile. "Pleased to meet you. Mr. Stone. Jebediah, please. Mr. Stone makes me feel older than I am." He flashed a charming smile, and Clara couldn't help but notice the way his eyes lingered on her a moment too long. He gestured towards the house. And this must be Jacob's spread. Heard he finally took himself a wife. Never thought he'd have it in him. His words were casual, But Clara detected a subtle undercurrent of something she couldn't quite place. "Jacob's a good man," Clara said, her tone firm. Jebediah chuckled. "Oh, I'm sure he is. Quiet, though. Always been a bit of a loner. A pretty woman like you must be a welcome change around here." He stepped closer, and Clara found herself instinctively taking a step back. The air around him was thick with a cologne that was far too strong for the Wyoming frontier. "He's been very welcoming," Clara said, avoiding his gaze and returning her attention to the laundry basket. "Heard you came all the way from back east," Jebediah continued, undeterred. "Must be quite a change from whatever fancy life you were living before." He leaned against the wagon, crossing his arms, and continued to watch her, making her feel like a prize animal at a county fair. "It's different," Clara conceded, "but I like it." She hung another shirt on the line, snapping it with more force than necessary. "I bet you do," Jebediah said, his voice laced with a knowing tone that made Clara's skin crawl. "Fresh air, wide open spaces, and a husband who's probably grateful for any company he can get." Just then, a figure appeared at the edge of the yard. Jacob, his face weathered and his eyes narrowed, walked towards them with a deliberate stride. He carried a coil of barbed wire over his shoulder, the metal glinting in the sunlight. "Jebediah," Jacob greeted, his voice flat. "Didn't expect to see you out this way." Jebediah straightened up, his easy smile faltering slightly. "Jacob, just thought I'd welcome your bride to the neighborhood." He glanced at Clara, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Jacob's gaze followed Jebediah's, then returned to Clara, his expression unreadable. "Clara can handle herself," he said, his voice low. Of course. Jebediah clapped Jacob on the shoulder, a gesture that seemed forced and insincere. "Just being neighborly. Say, I'm throwing a little get-together next Saturday night. Barn dance. Thought you two might like to come." Clara looked at Jacob, unsure of how to respond. She hadn't been to a dance in a lifetime that felt like it belonged to someone else. Jacob hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "We'll see," he said non-committally. "Great. Hope to see you there." Jebediah winked at Clara, then turned back to his wagon. "Well, I should be going. Plenty of work to do. You take care now, Jacob." "You." "Clara, it was a pleasure." He climbed back into the buckboard and, with a flick of the reins, sent the bays into motion. As the wagon rattled away, Clara could feel Jacob's eyes on her. "What was that all about?" Jacob asked, his voice tight. Clara shrugged, trying to downplay the encounter. "He just introduced himself, said he was being neighborly." Jacob snorted. Jebediah Stone doesn't do neighborly unless there's something in it for him. He dropped the coil of barbed core. Wire with a clang, the sound echoing in the sudden silence. "He invited us to a dance," Clara said, changing the subject. Next Saturday." Jacob frowned. "I don't know about that, Clara. Jebediah's got a reputation he trailed off, his gaze fixed on the receding dust cloud left by the wagon. "What kind of reputation?" Clara pressed. Jacob hesitated, then sighed. "He's ambitious, and he usually gets what he wants, especially if it belongs to someone else." He looked at Clara, his eyes filled with a worry that she hadn't seen before. "Just be careful around him, Clara. He's not to be trusted." Clara swallowed, a knot forming in her stomach. She had come to Wyoming to escape the shadows of her past, but it seemed that trouble had a way of finding her, no matter how far she ran. And this Jebediah Stone, with his charming smile and calculating eyes, felt like a storm gathering on the horizon, threatening to shatter the fragile peace she had begun to build with Jacob. The wind began as a somber sigh, slithering beneath the house's edges and jiggling the window panes. Clara, wrestling with a recalcitrant bread dough, froze, attentive. Jacob was out doctoring a sick calf, and the sudden stillness felt burdensome, ripe with unacknowledged worries. Soon the sea eye swelled to a snarl, and the sky shifted from pale cerulean to a livid plum. Plump raindrops began pelting the glass, dimming the already dusky kitchen. A lance of lightning briefly spotlighted the yard, etching the barn's silhouette against the tempestuous heavens. A deep-throated rumble followed, vibrating through the floor and resonating in Clara's very core. A primeval disquiet seeped into her, far removed from the measured apprehension she'd known back east. This was unbridled, a natural power heedless of human affairs. The rain intensified, drumming on the roof like a fusillade of pebbles. The gales shrieked, thrashing the trees into a wild dance. Clara strained to see through the pain, searching for Jacob's form in the deluge. Unease tightened its grip. He'd been gone longer than anticipated. A desperate scratching at the back door yanked her attention. It was Bess, the calico, fur slicked to her bony frame, pupils dilated in alarm. Clara yanked the door open, and the cat shot inside, a frantic ginger streak. She vanished under the table, a low growl rumbling in her chest. Clara knelt, using gentle tones. "Hush, Bess, hush now. It's just a squall." Tentatively, she offered a hand toward the quivering creature, and after a moment, Bess permitted Clara to stroke her saturated fur. The cat's muscles were taut, but she offered a feeble purr, a tiny beacon of comfort amid the escalating pandemonium. Another lightning strike, impossibly close, detonated into a shattering crash of thunder. Bess leaped away from Clara's touch, shrinking further beneath the table, burying her face. Clara remained kneeling, hand extended, murmuring soft reassurances. She understood Bess's dread. She too felt fragile, subjected to the caprices of a force beyond her control. But, in comforting the animal, she discovered a flicker of fortitude. The door groaned inward, allowing a blast of wind and rain to invade the kitchen. Jacob loomed in the portal, drenched, his hair plastered to his forehead. He looked taxed, but his gaze, meeting Clara's, contained an element she couldn't quite decipher. Peace of mind, perhaps? Or something deeper? "Close it, Jacob," Clara called above the storm's bluster. He wrestled the door shut against the gale's resistance, then sagged against it, drawing deep breaths. That cafe I managed to get him inside, but it was a close call. He straightened, and Clara noticed a cut bisecting his cheek, a thin crimson wheal against his tanned skin. "You're injured," she gasped, rising. "Just a trifle," he dismissed. "I'm more concerned about the barn. The wind's intensifying. I have to reinforce the roof. In this maelstrom, you can't return out there," Clara protested, her voice laced with anxiety. "I must," he stated, jaw firm. "Those animals rely on me." Another electric flare illuminated the kitchen, followed by an ear-splitting thunderclap. The structure shuddered. Bess emitted a high-pitched yowl from her refuge. Clara clutched Jacob's arm, her fingernails digging into his sodden sleeve. "Don't, Jacob, please. It's too perilous. Let it be. Whatever will be, will be. Your safety is worth more than a barn roof." The words burst from her, raw and forceful. She hadn't acknowledged the depth of her feelings. He studied her, his eyes probing, as if evaluating the authenticity of her expression. The storm raged externally, but within the confined kitchen, a different voltage sparked between them. "The root cellar," he said, his voice almost lost in the wind. "We should seek shelter in the root cellar." Without awaiting a reply, he grasped her hand and guided her toward the back. He snatched a lantern from a peg near the entryway and fired it, the wavering flame painting shifting shapes upon their visages. He heaved open the hatch, exposing a shadowed, humid staircase leading into the earth. A current of coolness and decay wafted upward. "After you," he offered, his voice gentle. Clara hesitated only an instant before descending the steps, Jacob close behind. The cellar was constricted and confined, with raw stone walls and an earthen floor. The atmosphere was heavy with the scent of moist dirt. Jacob attached the lantern to an overhead hook, washing the space in a pale yellowish light. They seated themselves on a weathered wooden bench, the cellar's only furnishing. The din of the storm was muted here, but still audible the wind's lament, the rain's relentless patter, the sporadic peal of thunder. An uncomfortable quiet descended. Clara could sense Jacob's gaze, but she averted her own, concentrating on the lantern's quivering light. The storm continued its onslaught, untamed and pitiless. Time seemed to walk and stretch. After what seemed like an age, Clara shuddered. The cellar was frigid and damp, and her lightweight dress provided scant insulation. Jacob noticed her reaction. Silently, he shrugged off his saturated coat and draped it about her shoulders. It was weighty and reeked of rain and horses, but it was warm, and Clara sank into it with gratitude. "Thank you," she murmured, scarcely audible. He offered no verbal answer, but his hand brushed hers on the bench. He didn't retract it. Instead, he rotated his hand and gently enclosed hers within his. His hand was rough and calloused, but his grip was surprisingly tender. Clara lifted her gaze to meet his, her pulse quickening. His eyes, in the dim light, were dark and intense, filled with an emotion she couldn't name. He scrutinized her face, his gaze lingering on her lips. The storm continued its fury outside, but within the small, humid cellar, a delicate bloom of connection unfolded. He leaned closer, his breath warm against her cheek. She closed her eyes, anticipation fluttering within her chest. And then, as the storm crested, he kissed her. It was a careful kiss at first, a gentle exploration of her lips. But as the thunder reverberated above, the kiss intensified, growing more urgent, more fervent. It was a kiss conceived of apprehension and vulnerability, of shared adversity and unexpected bond. It was a kiss that pledged comfort and aspiration amidst turmoil. When they finally drew apart, breathless, the atmosphere between them thrummed with unspoken yearning. Clara's heart pounded within her ribcage, and her cheeks burned with heat. She regarded Jacob, her eyes reflecting a blend of bewilderment and desire. He mirrored her gaze, his own shadowed with emotion. He raised his hand and softly brushed a stray lock of hair from her face. "Clara," he breathed, his voice husky. But before he could utter another word, another deafening crack of thunder rocked the cellar, and the lantern faltered and died, plunging them into complete darkness. The cellar's damp chill still clung to Clara, a persistent shadow even after she and Jacob re-entered the house, and its comparatively cozier air. The quick kiss they'd shared vibrated softly beneath her skin, a clandestine ember warring with the fear that had lingered. A realization took root, surprising her with its force. Bitter Creek wasn't just about fleeing what she'd left behind. It was about cultivating a future her heart ached to build with Jacob. The following dawn broke sharp and pristine, the tempest having moved on with surprising haste. After a quiet breakfast, Jacob departed to survey the damage to the fences, leaving Clara with a burgeoning sense of purpose. Time to set her plans in motion. She discovered Ruth Miller behind the general store's counter, meticulously buffing a glass jar until it gleamed. The humble shop served as a vital artery to the scattered homesteads dotting Bitter Creek's landscape, offering an array of goods from essential grains and hardware to vibrant ribbons and dubious tonics. The air itself was a heady brew of tanned leather, robust coffee, and a faintly medicinal tang. "Morning, Ruth," Clara called out, stepping inside. Ruth's lined face bloomed into a welcoming smile. "Clara, good to see you're all right after that blow. Heard you and Jacob made it through unscathed." "We did," Clara replied. "Though I imagine the fences suffered some." She paused, gathering her courage. "Ruth, I was hoping you could lend me a hand. I have an idea brewing, and I need to gather a few things." Ruth's eyebrows arched with curiosity. "An idea, eh? Well, spill it, girl. My ears are open." Clara outlined her vision, a humble reading circle for the children of Bitter Creek. She spoke with passion, emphasizing the transformative power of education, the doors it could unlock, the chance it offered these youngsters to dream beyond the hardscrabble reality of frontier life. As she articulated her concept, a long-dormant fire rekindled within her. Ruth listened intently, her expression pensive. When Clara finished, she gave a measured nod. "That's a worthy ambition, Clara. Lord knows, these young'uns could use a little refinement." She chuckled, a dry, whispery sound. "Jacob won't object, will he?" "He's not aware yet," Clara confessed, a tremor of anxiety fluttering in her chest. "But I trust he'll see the value in it." Ruth's gaze softened with empathy. "He will. Jacob's a good man at his core. Just needs encouragement now and then." She winked, then turned to assemble the provisions Clara required: slates, chalk sticks, a handful of well-worn primers, and a large, robust ledger for transcription exercises. As she gathered the items, she shared snippets of Jacob's history with Clara, treading carefully and respectfully. She recounted the story of his late wife, Sarah, and their son, Thomas, both victims of a devastating fever years prior. She described Jacob's ensuing grief, his retreat from society, his quiet resignation to a life lived alone. "He's been through the crucible, Clara," Ruth murmured, her voice hushed. "Don't lose faith in him. He's worth the effort." Clara's heart ached. She had underestimated the depth of Jacob's pain, the burden he bore. This only solidified her determination to restore some joy to his existence, to construct a shared future, one step at a time. The following week, Clara hammered a painted sign to the post outside their small house. "Reading class all welcome." She waited, holding her breath, unsure if anyone would appear. To her delight, on the designated afternoon, a small group of children, ranging in age, cautiously assembled before the house. They were a diverse bunch, clad in mended clothes, their faces clean, but their eyes reflecting the mixture of curiosity and trepidation. Several parents stood nearby, their expressions conveying a blend of hope and doubt. Clara greeted them with a generous smile, her heart doing a frantic dance of anticipation and nerves. She ushered them inside, where she had fashioned a makeshift schoolroom in the main living area, employing wooden planks and overturned crates as rudimentary desks and seating. The inaugural session was, in a word, tumultuous. The children were fidgety and easily distracted, their attention spans proving shorter than anticipated. Some struggled to grip the chalk correctly, others dissolved into fits of giggles, and one small boy succumbed to tears, unable to decipher a simple word. Yet, amidst the apparent disorder, Clara gleaned promising signs. She witnessed the gleam of comprehension light up a girl's eyes as the concept of vowels finally clicked. She heard the exultant cry of a boy who successfully wrote his own name for the very first time. She felt the reassuring pressure of a small hand sliding into hers, seeking solace. As weeks turned into months, the reading class began to find its rhythm. The children grew more focused, their desire to learn gradually eclipsing their initial timidity. Clara realized she possessed a knack for teaching, discovering innovative techniques to stimulate their imaginations and render learning enjoyable. She regaled them with tales, led them in song, and even staged scenes from the primers, breathing life into the written words. One evening, after the lesson ended, Sarah Johnson, a mother of 3, approached Clara, her eyes brimming with gratitude. "Miss Clara," she began, her voice thick with emotion, "I can't express my thanks adequately. My little Thomas never cared for school before. Now, he can't stop talking about your class. He even attempts to read to his younger sisters each evening." Another parent, a weathered farmer named Jed, added his affirmation. "My daughter, Mary, has started assisting me with the bookkeeping. Never thought I'd witness such a thing." Clara felt a warm wave of fulfillment wash over her. She had sought refuge in Bitter Creek, yet she had stumbled upon something infinitely more valuable, a sense of purpose, a connection to a community, and the deep satisfaction of positively influencing the lives of others. Entering the house, she found Jacob seated near the hearth, absorbed in a newspaper. He glanced up as she came in, his expression inscrutable. "How did the class go?" he inquired, his tone carefully measured. Clara hesitated, then took a leap of faith. "It was remarkable, Jacob. The children are so eager to learn, and the parents they're deeply appreciative." He offered a slow nod, then returned to his newspaper. The silence that followed felt heavy, laden with unspoken thoughts. Clara yearned to share the stories of the children, the gratitude of their parents, the sheer joy she derived from imparting her knowledge. Yet, she sensed a resistance emanating from him, a reluctance to fully embrace this new dimension of her life. "Ruth mentioned you were collecting supplies," he stated, his voice still neutral. "Yes," Clara verified. "I trust you don't object." He finally raised his gaze, their eyes meeting. A fleeting emotion flickered within their depths, something she struggled to define. "It's your house too, Clara," he conceded, his tone gentler now. "You're free to do as you wish." Clara recognized that it wasn't wholehearted approval, but it wasn't outright rejection either. It was a subtle step forward, a tentative acknowledgement of her place in his world, in this community. And for the moment, that would have to suffice. Clara's breath hitched as Jacob guided a chestnut mare into the corral. Sunlight painted the rising dust motes around its hooves in hues of gold, but all she saw was a towering beast of muscle and unpredictable power. I don't know if I can do this," she mumbled, the words lost in the vastness of the open air. Jacob halted, the leather reins going momentarily lax. His gaze, searching and steady, settled on her face. "Can't do what, Clara?" "Ride," she confessed, dropping her gaze to the worn ground. "Horses. They've always seemed so immense." It was an egregious understatement. They were landscapes in themselves, living mountains. He didn't offer the easy balm of laughter or dismiss her fear as childish. That unexpected gentleness surprised her. "All right," he said simply. "We'll start slow." Securing Penny to the fence, he turned to her fully. "What is it specifically that frightens you?" She hesitated, grappling with emotions she rarely voiced. "I think it's the feeling of helplessness. That much power. What if I lose control? What if I fall?" A phantom echo of her father's fury, his sudden and brutal anger, resonated within her. The familiar sting of powerlessness washed over her. Jacob's expression softened, comprehension dawning. He extended a hand, stopping just short of contact, the warmth radiating outwards like a promise. They're not like people, Clara. They respond to kindness, a gentle approach, and I won't let you come to any harm. His sincere words chipped away at her unease. He was a world apart from her father. There would be no demands, no veiled threats, only patient instruction. He began with the basics, demonstrating the proper way to approach a horse, extending a hand for a scent-filled greeting. He showed her how to groom the mare, murmuring to her in a voice as smooth as river stones. Penny responded with soft nudges against his shoulder. Tentative at first, Clara found herself slowly relaxing. The bristly feel of Penny's coat, the rhythmic brushstrokes, the mingled sense of earth and leather, a curious sense of peace settled over her. Now, Jacob announced after a generous interval of grooming, let's see about getting you up there. He led Penny to a weathered mounting block. Foot in the stirrup, hand on the horn, swing your leg over. Seemed simple enough. It wasn't. The stirrup felt impossibly high, the saddle like a distant summit. Taking a steadying breath, she followed his directions. The initial attempt was awkward. She swayed precariously, nearly pitching forward. Jacob steadied her with a firm hand on her waist. Easy. Try again. The second time, after a strained grunt, she managed to hoist herself onto Penny's broad back. From this vantage point, she felt absurdly elevated, a fragile doll perched atop a mobile hill. Her grip tightened on the reins, knuckles straining white. Penny shifted beneath her, and a gasp escaped her lips. Relax. Jacob's voice was a soothing balm. She feels your tension. Just breathe. Clara squeezed her eyes shut, inhaling deeply. When she opened them, she focused on Jacob's calm, reassuring gaze. Loosen the reins, he instructed gently, and a light squeeze with your legs. Hesitantly, she obeyed. Penny responded with a tentative step, then another and another. Soon, they were moving in a slow, steady circuit around the corral. The motion was surprisingly fluid, a gentle rocking that eased some of her apprehension. The wind whispered secrets in her hair, the sun kissed her cheeks. For the first time, she glimpsed the allure of riding. Jacob walked alongside, offering encouragement and steadying instructions. That's it, Clara. You're doing wonderfully. Back straight, eyes forward. As they continued their slow dance around the enclosure, Clara's confidence blossomed. She began to feel less like a precarious passenger and more like a partner, moving in concert with the animal beneath her. A hesitant smile touched her lips. See? Jacob's voice held a note of quiet triumph. You've got a natural aptitude for this. Clara laughed, a sound as bright as sunshine. I wouldn't go that far. But I'm definitely less terrified than before. They practiced until the sun began its fiery descent, painting the sky in a kaleidoscope of oranges and violets. Her leg muscles burned, her hands ached. Yet she was loath to stop. A profound sense of accomplishment, long absent, filled her. Finally, Jacob called a halt. All right, that's enough for today. You've done magnificently. He assisted her as she dismounted, her legs threatening to give way. She leaned against Penny, patting her muscular neck in gratitude. Thank you, she told Jacob, emotion threading through her voice. For your patience. For not laughing. A genuine, dazzling smile illuminated his face, crinkling the corners of his eyes. Wouldn't dream of it. You faced your fear, Clara. That takes courage. He moved closer, his gaze lingering, intimate. And, he murmured, his voice dropping an octave, I like seeing you smile. A flutter ignited within Clara's chest. She longed to reach out, to feel the warmth emanating from him. But uncertainty held her captive. Instead, she managed, I enjoyed it. Much more than I anticipated. Good, he replied, his eyes still locked on hers. Perhaps we can do it again tomorrow. Perhaps, she whispered. As they walked back towards the house, Penny's soft footfalls a gentle rhythm behind them, Clara allowed a flicker of hope to ignite within her. Hope for the future, for the burgeoning connection between them, and for the possibility of finally shedding the weight of her past. The air hummed with the scent of sage and dust, and something else, elusive yet full of promise. The stagecoach ground to a halt, a cloud of dust blooming around the weathered facade of the post office. Clara shielded her gaze, observing Mr. Abernathy, the local postmaster, expertly sift through the day's deliveries. She'd tempered any expectation of news, yet a faint ember of the life she'd abandoned always flickered within her. Holt. Abernathy's gravelly voice carried, honed by years of wind and dust. And Bellamy. Miss Clara Bellamy? Her breath hitched. Enemy. A surname unheard for an age. Approaching, she felt her pulse thrum against her throat. Nearby, Jacob was occupied with Penny, his back presented, seemingly unaware of the exchange. 2 letters slayed across the scarred countertop. One for Jacob, the lettering blocky and precise, likely a seed order or invoice. The other Philadelphia postmark. Her Philadelphia. The script was foreign, cramped and spidery, yet the cheap paper and inky hue sent a shiver tracing her spine. "Thank you, Mr. Abernathy," she whispered, instinctively hugging the letters close. A tremor passed through her hands. Joining Jacob by Penny, she forced a lightness into her tone. "Just our correspondence, dear." He inclined his head, his eyes briefly scanning her expression, a silent inquiry. "Anything of note?" "Haven't opened them yet," she replied, perhaps too swiftly. Let's return to the cabin. The homeward journey stretched, each bump a stark reminder of the anxiety swelling within. Her fingers brushed against the letter nestled in her apron. Philadelphia. Who could be reaching out? And the reason? Jacob, seemingly attuned to her mood, offered a comforting squeeze to her hand. A silent anchor. Back at the cabin, the familiar scent of pine and the fire's warmth usually soothed her. Yet today, the compact space felt confining. Jacob settled into his customary fireside chair, unfolding his seed catalogue with a sigh. Clara immersed herself in supper preparations, methodically peeling potatoes, a whirlwind of contained agitation. The sensation of unseen eyes boring into her grew, of the past's tendrils reaching, grasping. "Everything all right, love?" Jacob's gentle query startled her. She nearly nicked her finger. "Fine, yes. Just anticipating those biscuits you enjoy." A wan smile tugged at her lips. "Planning to make them exceptional tonight." He observed her for a moment longer, his gaze reflecting a quiet perceptiveness that simultaneously reassured and unsettled her. He sensed her guardedness. He always could. Supper now simmering, Jacob absorbed in his catalogue, Clara slipped into their small bedroom. The chamber, containing merely a simple bed and patchwork quilt, served as their haven. Now, it felt like a snare. Extracting the letter from her apron, her hands shook violently. The paper was frail, like a whispered secret. With a measured breath, she tore the seal. The cramped script filled the page, ink blurring in patches, as if worked upon. "Clara, I pray this finds you. I know you wish to remain undiscovered, but I felt compelled to try. Matters here are bleak. Father is increasingly volatile. Silas is making inquiries. He has visited the boarding house thrice, insisting he merely wishes to converse. Please exercise caution, Clara. His temper is flaring." And when Silas is angered, the missive devolved into desperate, illegible scratches, culminating in a final urgent plea. "Please, Clara, do not return." It bore only the initial E. Ice water seemed to flood Clara's veins. Silas. The mere utterance of the name spurred a wave of nausea. Silas, adorned with a charming facade and possessed of merciless eyes. Silas, who harbored the delusion of ownership. He sought her. He was on his way. A primal fear constricted her throat, stealing breath. She must safeguard Jacob. Protect their burgeoning life. She couldn't allow Silas to obliterate it. Crushing the letter in her fist, her knuckles screamed white. Concealment was paramount. Shield it from Jacob. She couldn't burden him with this spectre. He had already endured undue suffering. But where? Her eyes darted around the confined space, flitting from the time-worn rug to the nicked wash basin. No haven existed, no space beyond his eventual discovery. Finally, she resolved upon the trunk at the bed's end, containing the remnants of her former Philadelphia life. Smoothing the creased paper as best she could, she secreted it beneath a mound of antique linens, burying it deep within the layers of fabric. A makeshift solution, yet the most viable one for now. Re-entering the kitchen, she forced a smile as Jacob glanced up from his catalogue. "Everything all right?" he inquired, his eyes questing. "Yes," she prevaricated, her voice carrying a telltale tremor. "Everything remains fine." As she stirred the simmering stew, she knew tranquility remained elusive. The spectres of her past had found her, and with each fleeting moment, they grew ever more palpable. The delicate peace she'd cultivated in Bitter Creek was on the verge of shattering. The stew breathed on the stove, its savory aroma a bulwark against the encroaching Wyoming chill. Clara stirred it mechanically, her thoughts a jumbled mess of apprehension and remorse. Tucked beneath her sewing kit lay the missive from Philadelphia, its tangible presence a reflection of the weight on her soul. Outside, Jacob saw to the horses, his form a welcome sight against the vast darkening canvas of the sky. She portioned out the stew, the metallic scrape of spoon against bowl jarring the stillness. He entered then, divesting himself of outerwear, cheeks flushed from the cold. A genuine smile bloomed on his face, reaching his eyes and banishing some of the lingering glue. "That smells divine, Clara," he rumbled. They ate in companionable quiet, punctuated only by the measured tick-tock of the mantel clock and the occasional snap of the fire. Clara toyed with her meal, the taste now flat. She observed Jacob, noticing the fine lines fanning from his eyes, the slight tremor in his hand as he lifted his spoon. He deserved candor, deserved to know the truth, but the words remained trapped. After supper, Jacob cleared the table with practiced ease. He poured coffee, then settled by the fire. Clara sat opposite him, hands clasped tightly. "Jacob," she began, her voice a bare thread. He looked up, a question in his gaze. "What is it, Clara? You seem burdened." She inhaled deeply, the air catching. "There's something I must confide." He set down his cup, brow creased with concern. "You can tell me anything, love." The fire spat, sending sparks dancing up the flue. Clara watched them, as if seeking answers in their ephemeral display. She began with half-truths, a fragile edifice designed to shield them both. "My father, he was a difficult man, not kind." Jacob waited patiently. "He was demanding," she choked, the word feeling flimsy. "Very demanding. I couldn't abide his ways. That's why I fled Philadelphia." Jacob scrutinized her, his gaze unwavering. Perceptive. He saw the fear shimmering beneath the surface, the tremor in her fingers, the glint of suppressed tears. He reached across the distance and enclosed her hand in his touch firm, yet gentle. "Clara," he murmured, "you don't need to dissemble with me. I see you're holding back." His tenderness shattered her resolve. The dam broke, and the truth surged forth, a cascade of anguish and humiliation. "He abused me. Jacob," she gasped, the words ragged. "My father, he hurt me. For years. And told me I was deserving. That I was worthless." Silence descended, broken only by the fire's murmur. Jacob's hand tightened, offering silent support as she continued. Clara recounted everything: the perpetual dread, the relentless labor, the cruel pronouncements that eroded her spirit. She spoke of her decision to escape, the frantic gathering of belongings, the perilous journey westward. When she finished, she trembled, consumed by sobs. Jacob drew her into his embrace, his powerful arms a sanctuary against the inner turmoil. "And so deeply sorry, Clara," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I never knew." She clung to him, burying her face in his shoulder, the warmth a stark contrast to the long-held cold. After what seemed an age, the weeping subsided, leaving her spent. She drew back slightly, her eyes reddened. "There's more," she whispered. She retrieved the letter, handing it over. Jacob accepted it, brow furrowed. He scanned the text, his expression darkening as he absorbed the contents. He met her gaze, his eyes a blend of anger and protectiveness. "Silas," he stated, his voice a low threat. "Who is Silas?" "An associate of my father's," Clara replied, avoiding his eyes. "Someone dangerous." Jacob's jaw clenched. He folded the letter with a decisive snap. He rose, drawing Clara up with him. He steered her to the window, gesturing to the sprawling landscape surrounding their home. "This is our haven now, Clara," he declared, his voice resolute. "And I will allow no one to harm you. Not your father, not this Silas, no one." He faced her, his eyes blazing with determination. Cupping her face, he gently brushed away the remaining tears. "I vow, Clara," he said, his voice unwavering, "I will safeguard you. I will keep you secure. You are not without worth. You are resilient, and you are courageous. And you deserve happiness. And I will move heaven and earth to ensure it." He lowered his head and kissed her, a tender, reassuring kiss laden with comfort and protection. It wasn't a passionate embrace, but a promise. A promise of unwavering support, of relentless defense, of unconditional love, regardless of what lay ahead. In that moment, cradled in Jacob's arms, a spark of hope ignited within Clara. Perhaps, just perhaps, she could finally outrun her past and forge a future brimming with love and joy. Yet, the spectre of Silas remained, a menacing shadow poised to extinguish the fragile light now flickering in her heart. The general store throbbed with whispered rumors, a low-grade fever of conjecture, masquerading as neighborly solicitude. Propped against a sack of Durham wheat, Jebediah Stone held court before a small gathering. Arriving with the dawn, his ease seemed well rehearsed, a practiced smile pasted across his features. "Word is, she rode in all the way from the Eastern Territories," Jebediah drawled, flicking imaginary lint from his painstakingly sculpted mustache. "Can you fathom the tales she could spin?" Old Man Hemmock, his spine permanently bent, let out a dry, rasping chuckle. "Tales, you say? What manner of tales, Jebediah?" Jebediah emitted a low, purring sound. "Well, now, Wouldn't curiosity prick at you? A woman uproots her entire life must be propelled by a potent force, wouldn't you reckon? He paused, letting the insinuation simmer. I've gleaned whispers suggesting her father possessed a volatile temperament. He left the thought suspended, allowing darker imaginings to bloom in the minds of his listeners. His known fact, a drunken, abusive man, remained unmentioned for the far darker possibilities. Sarah Jenkins, respected for her incisive wit and even more discerning gaze, studied him with suspicion. Jacob appears happy enough, and Clara strikes me as a kind soul. Jebediah waved a dismissive hand, his brow furrowed in an attempt at sincerity. Appearances deceive, Sarah. A man such as Jacob deserves clarity regarding the woman he pledged his life to. For his own protection, of course. The affected solicitude dripped with malice. Behind the counter, Ruth Miller's anger climbed with each word. She'd long pegged Jebediah as a charmer with a forked tongue, and this transparent attempt to poison the well confirmed her suspicions. With a forceful thwack, she slammed a stoneware crock of pickled eggs onto the countertop, the sharp report cutting through the murmurings. Jebediah, why not occupy yourself with your own affairs? Clara is a fine woman, and Jacob is fortunate to have her. Undeterred, Jebediah merely flashed a disarming grin. Just a concerned neighbour, Ruth. Nothing more. He tipped his hat, then ambled out, leaving a residue of discomfort hanging in the air. Later, Ruth discovered Clara tending her diminutive garden behind the house. The setting sun burnished the scene, casting elongated shadows in shades of ochre and amber. Clara, dear, Ruth began gently, approaching the flower beds. I have something you need to hear. Clara straightened, swiping a bead of perspiration from her forehead. Yes, Ruth? Ruth stalled, struggling to find the right words. Jebediah Stone was in the store this morning, peddling rumours, whispers, and half-truths. Clara's colour drained. She felt the weight of her secrets. This was the reckoning she had always feared. What sort of rumours? She breathed, her voice barely audible. Nothing verifiable, Ruth soothed. But he was alluding to your history, the reasons underpinning your departure, painting you as a less than respectable. Clara's hands began to shake. Her own dark history was all that she could think about. Did he mention any details? No specifics, but he implied certain things. He's trying to turn the town's sentiment, make Jacob question his faith in you. Clara squeezed her eyes shut, battling a wave of despair. She craved serenity, a sanctuary for a fresh start. But her past was a persistent pursuer, forever poised to swallow her whole. I should have been honest with him, she sighed. Ruth placed a reassuring hand upon Clara's arm. Don't torment yourself, child. You've committed no wrong. But you must brace yourself. This won't be the end. That evening, Jacob found Clara seated on the porch, gazing into the approaching twilight. A storm massed on the horizon, echoing the tempest raging within her. Clara? He questioned, settling beside her. He enfolded her hand in his touch a warm anchor. What troubles you? She hesitated, caught between sheltering him and the awareness that secrets would only fester like a wound. Ruth said that Jebediah was attempting to blacken my name with the townsfolk. He stirred up trouble. Jacob's jaw hardened. He'd instinctively distrusted Jebediah, sensing a cold calculation beneath the man's affable veneer. What exactly did he say? That I left my home. But there must be ulterior motives. But I'm not who I appear to be. She avoided his gaze, shame burning in her cheeks. Jacob gently tilted her chin, meeting her downcast eyes. Clara, look at me. I care nothing for the opinions of others. I know you. I know the woman you are, and I trust you implicitly." He tightened his grip, his eyes blazing with fierce devotion. The following morning, Jacob rode into town, his resolve etched on his face. He spotted Jebediah outside the saloon, sharing a raucous joke with a cluster of men. The sound jarred Jacob's senses. He dismounted and strode towards Jebediah, his eyes narrowed to slits. The laughter died, the air growing thick with anticipation. "Jebediah," Jacob stated, his voice a low rumble. "I understand you've been discussing my wife." Jebediah's grin wavered, but he swiftly composed himself. "Merely voicing my anxieties, Jacob. A man must safeguard his friends." "My wife is beyond your concern," Jacob countered, closing the distance. "And I am not your friend." Jebediah held his ground, though a flicker of apprehension danced in his eyes. "Just attempting to be supportive. Some might believe you deserve insight into her earlier life." Jacob's fist clenched at his side. "The sole truth of any consequence resides in her eyes, and I see a good heart, a generous nature, a woman deserving of respect." He paused, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Should I hear you disseminating falsehoods about her again, Jebediah, you will answer to me, and I guarantee you that is an outcome you will regret." He pivoted and walked away, leaving Jebediah and his cohorts in stunned silence. The declaration was explicit. Clara was under his aegis, and anyone daring to threaten her would face his unleashed fury. Lies carried a heavy levy, Jacob thought, far steeper than Jebediah could possibly imagine. Dust devils, whirling dervishes of dirt, danced down Main Street, echoing the disquiet churning in Clara's gut. Helping Ruth at the mercantile, she unpacked a shipment of vibrant calico, delivered fresh by the stagecoach. Ruth, a gentle hum escaping her lips, unfurled a bolt the colour of daffodils. "This would suit you beautifully, Clara. A new dress for the social dance." Clara offered a feeble smile. The prospect of exposure, of genuine connection, sent a chill unrelated to the prairie wind crawling across her skin. She feigned preoccupation with the coffee tins, avoiding Ruth's kindly scrutiny. Moments later, a different disquiet needled her. 3 men rode into Bitter Creek, their faces etched with hardship and menace. These weren't drifters. They radiated a coiled, predatory energy. The lead rider, obsidian-eyed with a scar slashing his brow, scanned the town with a proprietary air. An icy certainty gripped Clara. They were after her. Silas Blackwood. The name was a bitter taste on her tongue. He dismounted with a lithe efficiency, tethering his horse to the rail outside the mercantile. His imposing companions flanked him as he headed for the entrance. Clara's breath caught. Her palms grew slick with sweat as she gripped a shelf for support. Oblivious, Ruth bustled forward, a cheerful greeting poised on her lips. "Welcome to Miller's Mercantile. How can I help you, gentlemen?" Silas ignored Ruth, his gaze sweeping the store until it snagged on Clara. His expression was a bone-chilling blend of triumph and avarice. "Clara," he rumbled, his voice a low rasp that vibrated through her. "Come on out. Don't make this difficult." The colour leached from Ruth's face as she swiveled toward Clara, confusion blossoming into dread. Clara stood paralysed, a cornered creature facing its hunter. "Clara?" Ruth whispered, barely audible. Swallowing against a constricted throat, Clara met Silas's stare. "I don't know you," she lied, the words heavy as stones. A dry chuckle escaped Silas. "Don't play games, Clara. Your daddy sent us to bring you home. He misses his little girl." The words were a charade, masking brutality with false affection. Her father didn't yearn for her. He craved control. "She's not going anywhere with you," a voice thundered from the doorway. Jacob. He filled the entrance, shoulders braced, a cold fury blazing in his eyes, a side of him she'd never witnessed. He hadn't planned on coming to town until later, but he'd spotted the trio riding in from the ridge overlooking his property. His instincts screamed that something dark was unfolding. Silas turned, his lip curling in a sneer. "And who might you be?" "Her husband," Jacob stated, his voice dangerously quiet. "And I suggest you leave her in peace." Silas's eyes narrowed, dismissing Jacob with a single glance. He clearly saw no threat. "Husband, is it? Seems she left out a few details, wouldn't you say?" He swung his gaze back to Clara, a cruel smile twisting his lips. "Go on, Clara. Tell your husband why you fled home. Tell him about the favors you did for your daddy." Clara gasped, her complexion ashen. His words hung like a poisonous cloud, threatening to choke her. This was it. The past she had desperately tried to bury was erupting around her. Jacob's gaze flicked to Clara, searching for confirmation. He saw the fear, the shame, the profound hurt shimmering in her eyes. Whatever Silas implied, it was a deep wound. He stepped forward, placing himself squarely between Clara and Silas. "I don't give a damn what she did before she came here," he said, his voice ringing with unwavering conviction. "She's my wife now, and I won't tolerate you besmatching her." "Besmatching?" Silas's laugh was sharp-edged. "I'm just stating facts. Ask Lee yourself." He waved a dismissive hand toward Clara. "Go on, Clara. Tell him about the Blackwood family skeletons." Clara remained mute, her gaze locked on the floor. She couldn't speak, couldn't bear to witness judgment or revulsion in Jacob's eyes. Ruth, recovering her composure, advanced, her face etched with determination. "You're disturbing the peace," she stated, her voice surprisingly resolute. "And then to have to ask you to leave." Silas ignored her, fixating solely on Clara and Jacob. "Think you can outrun the past, Clara? Believe you can simply vanish and begin afresh? It doesn't work that way. The Blackwoods always collect their debts." Jacob's fist clenched. He'd had enough. "Get out," he growled, his voice low and menacing. "Before I help you." Anger flashed in Silas's eyes. "You and what army, old man?" The two flanking men shifted, their hands hovering near their sidearms. The air crackled with tension, heavy with the spectre of violence. "You don't want this." Jacob's tone was unwavering, yet firm, infused with quiet resolve. "This is my wife, and this is my town. I suggest you mount up, ride out of here, and forget you ever laid eyes on her." Silas hesitated, assessing the situation. He saw the conviction in Jacob's gaze, the unwavering spirit. He also noted the growing crowd gathering outside the mercantile, drawn by the ruckus. He knew he wouldn't prevail in a showdown here. Not today. "This isn't finished, Clara," he spat, his voice laced with venom. "Blue, be back." He pivoted and stalked back to his horse, his two shadows close behind. They mounted and departed Bitter Creek, leaving behind a swirling cloud of dust and a lingering sense of impending doom. Jacob watched them depart, his fist still tight. He turned to Clara, his expression softening. He reached out and gently enclosed her hand in his warm, reassuring grasp. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. Clara gazed up at him, her eyes brimming with tears. She longed to unburden herself, to reveal the secrets eating her alive. But the words tangled in her throat, choked by fear and shame. She started, her voice trembling. "You don't have to tell me anything you're not ready for," he said softly. Just know I'm here. Whatever it is, we'll face it together." His words, his steadfast trust, were a soothing balm to her wounded spirit. But she knew the truth couldn't remain veiled forever. Silas would return, and when he did, he wouldn't be so easily swayed. The confrontation in Bitter Creek was merely the overture. The real struggle loomed. The air in Bitter Creek vibrated with unease, a residual tremor from Silas Blackwood's exit. His thinly veiled menaces lingered, leaving a bitter aftertaste on the town's tongue. Yet, beneath the apprehension, a counter-surge of defiance began to swell. The catalyst arrived in the form of Ruth Miller, her voice like honed steel as she confronted Jebediah Stone near the Mercantile. Fueled by Silas's shadow and his own thwarted affections for Clara, Jebediah had been peddling slander about her, casting her as a woman of dubious repute. "Listen close, Jebediah." Ruth's pronouncement cleaved the morning quiet. "Clara Bellamy sought sanctuary in this town, finding it with Jacob. You've no justification for your vile gossip. She's a worthy woman, and we stand with her." A small crowd materialized, their expressions resolute. Even those initially skeptical of the mail-order bride arrangement discovered themselves siding with Clara. They recognized her quiet fortitude, her industrious spirit, and the burgeoning tenderness between her and Jacob. Confronted by Bitter Creek's united resolve, Jebediah stammered and withdrew, his face burning with a mixture of shame and resentment. The whispers dissipated, replaced by a quiet resolve. The town's women, inspired by Ruth, began planning a bridal shower for Clara. Wicker baskets brimmed with homespun quilts, jewel-toned jars of preserves, and practical gifts for the ranch, tools honed sharp, packets swollen with potential seed, and durable work gloves crafted to withstand hardship. The men, awkward yet sincere in their solidarity, assured Jacob of their backing, promising aid in reinforcing his property against any looming danger. Clara felt a wave of emotion unlike any she had previously known. She had steeled herself for suspicion, judgment, perhaps even outright rejection. Instead, she discovered acceptance, a community prepared to embrace her, despite the enigma of her past. The burden of her concealed history pressed harder, yet the warmth of their generosity emboldened her to finally exhale. The wedding unfolded unpretentiously in Jacob's newly refurbished barn. Sunlight poured through the opened portals, bathing the rough-hewn timbers and the assembled townsfolk in its golden glow. Clara donned a dress crafted from a length of sky-blue fabric, a gift from Mrs. Henderson, the local seamstress. While simple, it possessed an understated elegance, tailored meticulously, a symbol of the nascent existence she was weaving. As she proceeded down the makeshift aisle, escorted by Thomas, the blacksmith, who had embraced the role of a paternal figure, her gaze locked with Jacob's. His eyes, typically clouded by sorrow, now shimmered with an unfamiliar brilliance, hope, affection, and unwavering faith in her. The ceremony, officiated by the itinerant preacher who visited Bitter Creek biannually, was concise, yet resonant with sincerity and truth. As he pronounced them husband and wife, a collective sigh of relief diffused through the barn. Jacob clasped Clara's hand, his weathered fingers meshing gently with hers. "I love you, Clara," he breathed, his voice laced with emotion. "Beyond anything I imagined possible." Tears blossomed in Clara's eyes. "And I love you, Jacob," she responded, her voice trembling with feeling. More deeply than words can express. The subsequent celebration bubbled with mirth, music, and spontaneous dance. The townsfolk shared a diverse potluck, each family presenting a culinary specialty. Clara, typically reserved, found herself laughing and engaging in conversation, experiencing a sense of belonging previously unknown to her. As the twilight deepened, Jacob guided Clara away from the revelry, towards the boundary of the ranch. They stood entwined, captivated by the vast Wyoming firmament, speckled with a myriad of incandescent stars. "Magnificent, isn't it?" Jacob remarked, his voice gentle. Clara inclined her head, her attention fixed on the horizon. "Indeed," she agreed. Yet her sentiment extended beyond the celestial display. She was alluding to everything: the ranch, the town, the man beside her, the life they were constructing together. "I recognize there are facets of you I don't fully comprehend, Clara," Jacob conceded, turning to face her. "But I apprehend enough. I perceive your kindness, your resilience, your courage, and I know you are the woman with whom I yearn to share my future." Clara drew a steadying breath, summoning her resolution. "There are aspects of my history you deserve to know, Jacob," she disclosed, her voice barely audible. Jacob delicately touched her lips with a finger. "We have time, Clara," he reassured. "An eternity, in fact. Unburden yourself when you are prepared. But understand this: no revelation will alter my feelings for you." Clara nestled closer, seeking solace against his chest. She recognized she couldn't shield her secret indefinitely, but for the moment, within this embrace, she felt secure, cherished, and optimistic. They remained in silence, absorbing the starlight and the sounds of the night. Eventually, Jacob clasped her hand and led her back towards the house, their steps buoyant with anticipation. The interior was hushed, the traces of the celebration cleared away. Jacob ushered Clara toward their bedroom, now shared as husband and wife. He faced her, his eyes brimming with tenderness. "Are you ready for this commitment, Clara?" he inquired, his voice deep and resonant. Clara nodded, her heart pounding an erratic rhythm. "Yes, Jacob," she affirmed. "I am." He reached out, cradling her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing the contours of her cheekbones. "I vow to never inflict pain upon you, Clara," he pledged. "I will always safeguard you." And in that instant, Clara believed him. She recognized their journey would not be without trials, obstacles, and perhaps even hazards. But she also knew they would confront them as one, hand in hand, their love an impenetrable armor against adversity. Embraced in each other's arms, Clara experienced a sense of tranquility, previously elusive. The past lingered, a spectre lurking in the recesses of her mind, yet its dominion had waned. She was emancipated. The subsequent dawn unfolded with brilliance, painting the Wyoming panorama in vibrant hues of gold and scarlet. Clara awakened to birdsong and the allure of brewing coffee. Jacob had already risen, tending to the livestock. She dressed rapidly and stepped outside, eager to embark on her new chapter. Jacob greeted her with an affectionate smile and a tender kiss. "Good morning, Mrs. Holt," he said, his eyes dancing with delight. Clara returned his smile. "Good morning, Mr. Holt," she responded. Together, they proceeded towards the barn, ready to confront the unfolding day. The path ahead remained indistinct, yet they were united, and that transcended all else. Engaging in their shared labor, repairing fences, and nourishing the animals, Clara experienced a sense of fulfillment she had never dared imagine. She had sought refuge in Bitter Creek, but she had unearthed something profound, a sanctuary, a family, and an enduring love. Her history would perpetually remain a fragment of her identity, but it no longer held the reins of her destiny. She was Clara Holt now, Jacob's wife, and a vital part of the Bitter Creek Collective. And as she surveyed the expansive Wyoming vista, she comprehended that anything was attainable. A new day had commenced, and she was poised to embrace its possibilities.